Snowman with TooLoudToolMusic.com. Welcome back to the collection. This week, we're going to talk about the very beginnings of Billy Idol. A couple weeks back, we went through all my Billy Idol vinyl, and I said I'd come back and do a Generation X episode, and here we are for the Generation X episode. So to give a little history, back in 1976, if I'm not mistaken, 21-year-old William Broad answered an ad in a paper for a band called Chelsea. He ended up being the guitarist of that band, and also answering that ad was a bass player by the name of Tony James and a drummer named John Toe. They would join up with lead singer John O'Hara, and they formed this band, Chelsea. It was a covers band, and so William and Tony didn't, they figured they could do better. So they grabbed John Towell and they left the band and they started their own band. And they came up with the name Generation X. And that's not named after that, I'm a Gen Xer. It's not named after that. It was named after a book from William Broad's mom called Generation X. And so they named it after that book. But at the same time, William Broad felt like that name wasn't a very good punk name. So they were going to be a punk band, so he needed a punk name. So he changed it to Billy Idle, I-D-L-E, because his teacher in high school thought he was really lazy and was always idle. And that's how he got that nickname. But he didn't like the spelling because it reminded him of Eric Idle from Monty Python, and he didn't want to have that same last name. So that's when he changed it to I-D-O-L, Idle. And so that's how William Broad became Billy Idol. So they got together to record their first album, simply called Generation X. It has Billy on vocals, and he was a guitarist, so he became vocals. So they had to bring in somebody on guitar, and they brought in Bob Andrews, nicknamed Durwood. So he handled the guitars, and John Toe was on drum. But before they recorded the album, Toe left the band, and they brought in someone by the name of Mark Lath, and he was the drummer. They signed with Chrysalis Records in 1977 and went into the studio with a gentleman by the name of Phil Wayman. He really didn't like them, didn't like the sound of the band or anything. So they ended up going with another producer by the name of Martin Rushnet. And his engineer was Alan Winstanley. And that will be important later on one of my vinyl that I have from them. And actually, Durwood, the guitarist, kind of claims the engineer for their sound more than the producer. So that says a lot about the producer. Generation X was a punk band, but, they really didn't have that aggressive attitude of the Sex Pistols, and they didn't really have that political charge of the Clash. They were kind of more of a pop punk, is how I would probably classify it. So they got a lot of ribbing and stuff because they really weren't a punk band. And then the albums, they come across a little bit punk, but they're definitely more, pop sound, I guess. And here's the flip side of it. I don't have an insert with this one. This copy I got from a buddy up in Canada, Aaron, Chrysalis Records. He had found out that I had most of their albums, but I was missing this one. And he came across it and he sent it to me as a gift. And so that was really cool. So that was when I finally got this album. There's different orders depending if you got a UK version or a US version. It just depends on which copy you have. The side one on this one, it's got Give Me Some Truth, which is, it's the John Lennon song. They do a great version of it. And so it's quite, I kind of like that one. Wild Youth is really great. Ready, Steady, Go was, I think, their first single. And that was kind of punk. That was very high energetic, great little song. Kleenex, which if you think about it, you'll understand what that one is for or what that song's about. Day by Day was really good, really catchy. 100 Punks is probably one of my favorites. It's just got a raw energy to it. Your Generation. This one has Kiss Me Deadly, and then Wild Dub, and another great one is Youth, 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 which has some great guitar work. I mean, I'm talking great guitar work. About 3 minutes into the song goes on for 6 minutes. 3 minutes in, Durwood, I guess I finished the song and Durwood's playing the guitar and he just goes nuts and he is just all over the place, throwing in every trick he can, including the kitchen sink and just really killing it. So as far as this album goes, Youth, Youth, Youth is probably my favorite track for that guitar piece on it. But it's just stellar. You'll have to hear that one. After this album, they toured a little bit over in UK and in France and stuff. And then it was time to do the second album. This time they brought in the producer, Ian Hunter, yes, from Mott the Hoople. And Ian, you know, he changed the sound. The sound is very different on this one. Yeah, there are some punk sounds, but they did a little, they did some things different as well. I'm not going to say Springsteen-y, Bruce Springsteen, but there's a couple songs that are kind of that way. There's some stock songs on here. You're like, what the heck are you doing? But it's not a terrible album. Um, Here's the four guys on here. See if I have an insert. No insert, but again, the blue Chrysalis label. Um, Billy and Tony did most of the songwriting, but I think Tony ends up doing more of it. Um, and they start having some friction here. Durwood Andrews, guitarist, and Billy not seeing completely eye to eye. So there were troubles brewing with this album. But this album has some really cool tracks. It opens with Running with the Boss Sound. And that is kind of, I don't know, how would I say? It's got a full energy. I guess it's punk, but there's just a really roughness to it that I kind of like. Night of the Cadillacs, pretty good punk sound. It's a good one-two punch with those first two songs. Paradise West, I'm not really a big fan of that one. That's the one I think that's kind of Bruce Springsteen like. I just don't really dig that one. But then they save themselves with Friday's Angels. It's a good one. King Rocker is ends the first side, and that's really a cool song. It's kind of like old school rock. I mean, think like Stray Cats kind of thing. That's how I'd always think of it. Some really, really good stuff there. But Valley of the Dolls opens up the second side, and that's really probably the strongest song on that side. And one of my favorites, a slower tempo. It's a little glammy. Well, with Ian Hunter as your producer, I can see how it would pop up as a little glam. But the back half of this album, it's a little bit weaker. And then the last track, The Prime of Kenny Silver's Part 1 and 2, I think a lot of people might like that one. For me, I don't know what the heck they're trying to do with that one. It is a long, drawn out song. Not a big fan of it. So after that album, they toured a lot. Frictions were really at an end. I mean, they were getting really bad. But they did decide that it was time to try and do another album. But the problem was with Chrysalis. Chrysalis had pretty much said they were going to drop them if the album didn't do very well, and the album didn't do very good. But they didn't drop Generation X per se. Durwood left the band after they recorded this album. The album never saw the light of day. Well, I won't say never. The album saw a light of day 20 years later, but it was shelved at this point. The band was split. Tony and Billy decided to go off and do their own little thing, and they found a new manager. And the manager they got was Bill Aucoin. And if you're a Kiss fan, you know who Bill Aucoin is. So Bill became their manager. He kind of wanted them to move to New York. Tony James was not into that, but Billy was kind of up for it. But before they did that, they recorded their album, but they changed their name. Instead of Generation X, they became Gen X. And the first album they did was Kiss Me Deadly. So we had Billy and Tony, and then they brought in Terry Chimes on the drum. And if you see, there's four people, but there's really only three band members listed. But there's also James Stevens, Steve Jones, and John McCouch. I butchered that, so I'm sorry. They all did guitar works on the album. James Stevenson, I think that's him on the cover, and he toured with them a little bit as well. But the punk sound was pretty much gone. They were now following the new wave kind of trend in the UK, and they became more of a pop band. And so they put out this album, And the very opening track is one that everybody should know. It's Dancing with Myself. You can see that on there. So Dancing with Myself is another Blue Chrysalis. That is the big song that kind of helped Billy Idol become a star on his own, because he took that generation, the Gen X song, and turned it into one of his solo songs as well. That, that's just a classic song, and it was inspired from their trip. They did a tour in Japan, and they were at a dance club, and people were standing in front of a mirror dancing by themselves, and so that's kind of where the title came from. If it's not, I don't think it's what you think it is. And then another song that came up next is Untouchables, which I think is a pretty well-known track. Billy uses it again later on, so that's probably why it's more well-known. Happy People was the following song. It kind of wasn't that happy. The last song on this side, Triumph, is more of that punk sound that they had. So they didn't abandon it completely, but they kept it. I mean, they kept a little bit of that rawness sound. The side two has a song called Revenge, Stars Look Down, What Do You Want, Poison, and Oh Mother. The album didn't do that great. Billy decided afterwards that he wanted to go to New York, and Tony did not. So the band was over after this album. But before we get on to the next thing, what I did find out at the store was this Gen X 12-inch for Dancing with Myself. So the other two songs on here were not on anything at the time, Loopy Dub and Ugly Dub, and I'm not a big dub fan, so I really wanted this for the Dancing with Myself, but also this cover. The cover is very telling. It's Gen X, but who's on the cover? Billy's on the cover. And then this creepy, disturbing little girl is on this cover as well. I have no idea why, but she's kind of scary. And I just picture a twin and standing there saying red rum. I don't know. But that cover should be pretty telling to have that Billy is the main thing, and it's called Gen X. So we kind of knew who Bill Aucoin's favorite was. And yeah, so that's where that ended up. So that is all the official albums that they had at the time. And then when I was in New York back in 2019, I was in Greenwich Village at a little record store, asked them if they had any Generation X stuff, and he pointed me towards this one. It's a two LP live recording. It's the BBC Transcripts disc series, number 126 for 1978. It is a double live album. It was recorded on December 8th, 1978. And it's great. The albums from Generation X never really captured that full punk energy and that full punk spirit, but the live album does. So if you can get a live album and you can find it, grab it. It is fantastic. It has got all the hits that you want to hear. It has got a brown color for this disc. And they're not the prettiest colors. And then this one's a gold translucent. So not sure how they go together. Colors, maybe they were just like whatever color they had laying around. They stuck them there and then they popped them on and played them. But this is phenomenal stuff. I mean, Ready, Steady, Go is open, and they go straight into From the Heart. It's got No, 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 which I love, Kiss Me Deadly, King Rocker, Promises, Promises, 100 Punks, and Kleenex is a mixed together medley. But what's really great is there's a rock and roll medley at the very end. And it's got Gene Vincent's Say Mama, Pete Town, I Can't Explain from The Who, Little Bit of Love by Free, Wishing Well from Free, and Let There Be Rock from AC/DC. So really cool, just a cool album to have. So if you see this one anywhere, I definitely recommend that one. All right, so now I mentioned there was an album that didn't get released and stuff. So 20 years later, it's been released. And it's called Sweet Revenge. Some versions say KMD Sweet Revenge. and some just say Sweet Revenge. The KMD is for Kiss Me Deadly and Sweet Revenge. This was not an official release. Tony James and Billy Idol did not approve of this release, but Durr Atwood, who had the tapes, I guess, ended up releasing the album. My version is this one. I think mine's from Spain. I am not positive on that one. I apologize if it's wrong. But here's Sweet Revenge. They give a little story on the back. And then it's just a black vinyl with the black label. I actually kind of like that black label. Look at that, it's pretty. So it's really cool. What I was going to say, there are 4 songs on here that ended up on Kiss Me Deadly, and then the rest of them are original to this disc, to this album. So the 4 songs that are on here that they used on Kiss Me Deadly are Dancing With Myself, Stars Look Down, Triumph, and Revenge. Those are the four tracks. I asked this, and Revenge is the one I hated on that. This version of Revenge I don't like either. But the original songs that they had on here, Modern Boys, which was a good, fast, punk attitude kind of song. Girls, 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 not the Motley Crue song, is another great high energy track. It's kind of silly, but it's a really a good track. Anna Smiles is another one that's got a real frantic kind of pace to it. Good energy. It's just a solid, it's actually a very good album, and I think would have done fairly well. And then there are some songs that are just okay. But still, it was awesome to finally have this album come out after 20 years after its release. It took me a long time to get it. But this is an unofficial release. I do have an official release on it, and we'll talk about that later. A few years back, I'm trying to remember what year it was. I want to say 2020. For Record Store Day, if I'm not mistaken, they released this Generation X Deluxe edition. So this is a box set, 3 LPs of the debut album. You get the original album, which is we've shown just a second ago. And it's this, yeah, it's a different track list than what I have on the other. And then disc 2 and 3 are in this gatefold with some great pictures. So the album's colors and the sleeves in here, it's got some more pictures, but the albums are just black, not colored vinyl or anything. Great little, it's got a red label on one side and a black label on the other. Trying to think, the 2 albums, they're both basically B-sides, some rare tracks, some outtakes, some rough mixes, and all that. And I have to say, I really love it. I think they're all really great, especially the outtakes and the mixes on disc 3. Some of these are Phil Wayman. Remember I said he was the original producer, so some of those are from his versions, and some are done from Wayne Staley mixed some of these as well. So just some really a good collector's item to have of the band. If you like that album, it's definitely highly recommended that you get that. The only other vinyl I have is something I found fairly recently, back in 2022. And it's a fairly new release. It's the demos, Generation X demos from 1977. It says it says when I was reading up on it, it says it was from the Cheswick recordings. And I think that's what that is. So excuse me if I'm not. Yeah, the Cheswick Records when they were recording for them. But the problem is there's 13 songs on here, and they only recorded 5 songs at the Cheswick Records, and only 4 of those are on here. I mean, I'm not going to go through all of them. I don't want to do that to you. But it's just early mixes of everything. You got Day by Day, Wild Youth. So a lot of their early songs from those first 2 albums, the demos are on here. And I kind of love demos. I like to see where a song starts and then hear the final version and see how it ends up. That's intriguing to me. I enjoy that a lot. And as far as I rating this one, when I wrote it up, I did a 4 out of 5. So it's a really good demo. The sound quality is great. So for a bootleg, it's pretty good. And that's all the vinyl I have. And as far as Gen X other stuff, I have so few of it elsewhere, I thought I'd show it anyway. And here is Kiss Me Deadly, and it is on cassette. It is the only Gen X cassette I have at the moment. Hopefully I'll find some more. On CD, I have Valley of the Dolls. I won't be, it's not gonna be. And then I have a couple things that aren't on vinyl. One is a greatest hits called Perfect Hits 1975 to 1981. And it's just a collection of 15 tracks. It was released by Chrysalis. Um, if you want a good starting point in the band, this was a great place to start. I would recommend that. But if you want to get a little more adventurous, the hard to find is this Generation X Anthology. It is a 3-disc set. Disc 1 is a greatest hits compilation, basically. Instead of 15 tracks, there's 19 on here. Disc 2 is the official release of Sweet Revenge. So Billy and Tony finally decided to release it officially as a Gen X album, and it is on this is on Chrysalis. And then disc 3 is the real prize here. It's Osaka, Japan, 1978 live show, and fantastic. These guys, they really killed it live. I mean, I think live is where Generation X shined more so than the albums. Now, I like the albums anyway, but their live stuff is kind of where it's at for me. So if you get a chance, this one's really hard to come by. It took me a long time to get that one. I think I eventually ended up buying it on Discogs. And it's not cheap. It's not expensive, but it wasn't cheap. So I think that's everything. So we'll end it with that. So hopefully you like it. Maybe you'll go check something out with Generation X. And I hope you do, because the early stuff, it's a great place to see where Billy started and how things evolved to where he is now. So thank you for watching. Please click like and hit subscribe. It really helps the channel when you do that. If you feel up to it, leave a comment. We'll answer as quick as I can. And I think that's it. So y'all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time on The Collection.